Hello and welcome to my bookish channel. My name is Alice Hanoff and today I'm going to show you how I paint the edges of my books to make them look pretty on my shelf. So we start by removing the dust jacket, and then I take a normal size piece of paper and I fold it lengthwise in order to help cover the edges of both sides of the book. Now, you want to make sure to do this because this is what will protect the hardcover from the paints and everything that you're going to be using to make the edges themselves look pretty. Next, you cover the rest of the front. I typically like to use masking tape in order to tape the paper down. When you're taping, you want to make sure that the tape on the inside is only covering the actual paper you've added and not taping to the book paper itself. I have learned the hard way. If you do that, it will rip the inside cover of your book and you will be sad. Some people say you should just use painting tape and tape the whole thing. My experience has been painting tape will also rip the inside cover of your book. So a layer of paper is significant and will protect the book from paint, but will also protect the inside pages from being ripped. See, now it can fold and you're all good. Next, you want to make sure that the ends are protected as well, right where the spine is. So you can see I cut the page lengthwise in half and then I tape that as well, as close to the spine as possible. You're not going to be able to curl it around. That's what the blue painting tape is for at the end. So I make sure that I cover as much of the book itself with the normal paper. You can use cardstock if you prefer, or sometimes I use saran wrap as well if I'm feeling adventurous. Then you take the clear packing tape. Duct tape would also work fine. You cover the edges. This is where you're actually going to be putting the paint on the edges. You want to make sure you have a plastic layer to protect the paper, which will then protect the paper of your hardcover. Duct tape, really wide masking tape. I like clear packing tape just because I buy it in bulk for when I ship things, so I tend to have a lot of it. You want to make sure you cover the three main sides on the front and the back of the book itself, and then all that will be left is covering the actual spine bits. As you can see, I haven't done anything with that yet, but we will get to it. And you want to make sure the corners are very well taped up, because if you cut the tape the way that I did and you don't overlap it anywhere in the corner, you might get some paint bleed through in the corner, and that would be really disappointing for you to find out after you're all done. Next step is to take little bits of painting tape and cover that tiny bit of your book that we actually have left exposed. You want to make sure that your painting tape goes on there really well, because that is what's going to protect the little bit of the spine there from the paint. And depending on how you do the painting and how you position the book, it can be an area that actually ends up getting quite a bit of drippage of paint, and you want to make sure that you have protected that area, especially if you're painting a contrasting color to what the actual book cover is itself. And make sure you do both sides, and make sure you protect that little bit of thread or fabric or whatever it is that is in there as well, and get all the way around the corners, but not so much that you cover the actual paper corner, because then you'll end up with a white spot when you're done painting, and that's really frustrating when you take it all apart and you realize you have a big white blob. Now, the next step is going to be to gather all your supplies. So I have a book that I want to paint red and a book I want to paint green here. The boards are what you're going to use to press it together, and the clamps will hold it. That's my white acrylic, my green, my red, and I use an iridescent gel. That was the first one I showed, and that is what gives my books their sparkle effect. Now, the reason you use boards to clamp them together instead of just clamping itself, the boards will spread the pressure of the clamps across the entire book, as opposed to if you clamp on the cardboard itself, it will only put the pressure in that location. It won't spread it across the book as well as when you use boards in order to divide that pressure up. I like to use the bigger board on the bottom in order to have a stable base to work with. This just happened to be a shelf from IKEA. I had that broke, and I've used it for this since I started painting them. Next, you want to mix up your paints. I have an old yogurt lid here that I use. I have some green and red, and then I'm adding my iridescent paint here in order to give it that little bit of sparkle and that little bit of sheen. You have to be careful. It does give it a little bit of white as well. So if you're going for a super dark color like black, you want to make sure that you don't add so much of the sheen that you end up losing the color you're going for. So I take that into account when I'm picking my colors. And for this particular instance, you can see I have the covers for the two books that I'm going to be painting in order to compare the colors. I'm not going for an exact match. I just want to make sure that I'm happy with the shade of the red and the green that I come up with, and then it has the appropriate level of sparkle. Now, while you might not see as much sparkle in the paint as you're hoping to see, it will show up on the book, especially when it's in the light. So don't let that stress you out. Now, in my case, I made sure to put little dots so I remembered what book was blue and which book was green, because once you've covered it, it's really hard to tell which book is which. So if you're doing two, make sure that you mark them. I showed earlier that I had done pen marks on the green and red in order to help me. You can see the red one here, that I could then identify the green versus the red. Otherwise, I tend to paint books that are all the same color. That way I don't have to worry about keeping track of which is which, because I got burned the first time I did it. I had to unwrap an entire book in order to see which one it was in order to figure out what color to paint it. So don't be like me. Don't learn from my mistakes and make sure you put some kind of pen mark on it. The pen mark you will be able to paint over. That black dot you saw on the red book is because I bought the book from Book Outlet and it was a returned book. So that black dot tells you that it was returned. Sometimes it's a line. So when you're getting books like that, you want to make sure you pick a color that's dark enough to cover. Red, yellow, pink, those tend to be really troublesome colors to cover with. So I had to do quite a few coats of red on top of the black dot to make it go away, which, while not bad, every coat you do will then make it a little bit more challenging to take your book apart, simply because I am using normal acrylic paint, and acrylic paint is thicker than other paints. So this is what it looks like after I've declamped it. You can see they look great. The book has been protected, but it is a solid mass of paper now. And then what you have to do next is bend it around as much as you can, and then individually pry every single page apart. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why on earth would you do this? What I typically do is I plan and paint books just before my husband and I have like a movie night. And then I just sit on the couch with him watching whatever movie we've picked, pulling one page apart at a time. I did it this evening that I did it for the video because I had been doing editing of books for 8 days and my brain needed a break. And the monotony of painting and then pulling apart these pages helped me. So this is the final product once I've pulled it apart. You can see I have already taken the paper off the green one. This is how you want to take the paper off when you're done. So you want to be careful if some of the tape has stuck on the inside. If you get as excited and rip like I did, you might end up ripping some of your cover. But I was confident that I did not have to worry about that. So I went to town ripping that sucker off. So just be careful on your first try. Now, I go ahead and I put my dust jackets back on for the red book and for the green book, and you'll be able to see how beautiful they are when they are all finished. So now I just have to find time to paint my blue book, Recursive Dark and Lonely, and then I will have the full set, sparkly and finished.